I'm going to call this video Slump Molds 101. What I'm going to show you here is what a slump mold is, how to make them, how to use them. And basically a slump mold is just a piece of plaster that some clay is laid out over the top, a slab of clay, and it slumps down and it forms a shape. This particular mold I used to make this plate, and I bought these. I bought a whole bunch of these one day. I went to the dollar store and got a bunch of real cheap dishes. Here's one that's made into a bowl. It's a free-form bowl that I basically made by slumping some clay over this slump mold here, which was poured into a big plastic salad bowl. So, you can get different sizes, and you can use the same plate, and you can make, or the same bowl, and you can make different shapes depending on how much plaster you put in. So let's get started, and I'll show you how I make the molds. All right, we're going to make some molds now. Let me start by talking about plaster a little bit. This is casting plaster, and normally when I use this, I would wear one of these masks to protect myself from inhaling the dust. But I'm going to not do that today so you can hear me talk. Plaster is something you can get at the craft store, but I like to buy mine at a lumber yard. I bought a 100-pound bag of it a couple of years ago, and I'm still using it. They use the plaster to plaster walls in homes, and it's not very expensive. It's less than $20. And these molds, you can also, the slump mold, you can also buy at a craft store or at your ceramic supply shop. But they're probably going to cost you 20 bucks a piece. And I'm probably going to make 100 out of this sack that I made, that I paid 20 bucks for. So economically, it's much, much cheaper. And it's kind of fun because then you get to try out all kind of different shapes. And you're not going to run into anybody that's using the exact same mold that you are, so your work's going to be a little bit unique. So you start out by putting some water in the container, and this one this is a rubber container. It bends. It's made especially for this, but you can do this perfectly well with a yeah, you can see the dust coming up from there. You can do this perfectly well with just any old bucket. It'll be fine. They always say that you should add the plaster to the water, but if you get it too thick, you can always add a little bit more water. It just takes a minute, and you have to do this relatively quickly because the plaster will start setting up, and the clue that it's starting to set up is when it starts getting warm. It'll actually get warm, and at that point it starts turning hard. All right, so that's probably enough plaster there. All right, so that's pretty good. It may be a little bit thin, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Now the molds, I like to put a little bit of vegetable oil in them. I got a little bit of vegetable oil. I put it on a paper towel here, and I just wipe some in my molds so that it releases better. You don't need to get real serious about this. It releases pretty well, and especially in these plastic ones. So I'm going to pour a little bit of this plaster in here. Notice I really wasn't too careful about how much I made, and because I have enough plates here, and I know that I'm going to if I have too much, then I'll just add it and make another one. But this looks about right to make 2. So there it is. That's all there really is to it. Just a couple of shallow dish molds that are ready. It takes about 2 or 3 hours. Let it dry, let it harden really good. Overnight's better. All right, I'm going to show you one more method of making slump molds that I think is really fun. Well, another way to do it is to make a frame and then stretch some cloth over it. In this case, I used some canvas I had left around. I made one square one and one rectangular one. And I did the same thing that I did with the plates. I mixed up some plaster and I poured it right in the middle like this. And it ended up with a sort of a free-form shape, but basically it's a circle and an egg kind of a shape. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's got just a sort of a slight bump on it that you could use to lay some clay over. It depends on how big it is and how loose you pour the fabric. It's fun to play with it. You can try it different ways. Make the fabric real loose and it'll sink down more. You'll get more of a lump. And you can try different shapes as well by the way you make your frame and the way you stretch your canvas. So this is fun. Give it a try. Okay, so I'm going to roll this slab through now, my slab roller. And like I said, you can do this perfectly well with a rolling pin. As long as I got the slab roller here, I thought I would demonstrate it for you. I'm going to just roll this slab out through here. Okay, so I rolled the slab out, and I'm going to go ahead and just use a rib, clean off that texture from the canvas in the slab roller. And I went ahead and I made a template. I figured this out beforehand, how big I want my plate to be that I'm going to make. Very simple. I just put it down here, cut around the edges using a needle tool, a thin one. They seem to work the best. It's important to hold it up straight so you don't get a curved or slanted side on your plate. Then I take my slump mold and I set it down in the middle. Make sure I get it pretty close to the middle. Take a canvas covered board, put it on top. Then I flip this over. And there's a slab on top of my slump mold. I'm going to take a little bit of time here, fussing with it maybe, cleaning up any sharp edges, rounding off the corners slightly, and maybe write my name on the bottom. Then I'm going to let this dry for a couple hours, get nice and stiff, then I'll turn it over. All right, a couple hours has passed. It's leather hard. Now I'm going to flip it over and see what we got. All right, so there's a plate. You can't find an easier way to make an effective, beautiful plate ready for your decoration. That concludes our video, Slump Molds 101. Hope you enjoyed it.